morning, dear students. We are going to discuss scalp today. So, after having done with osteology of head and neck, now we will see the soft organs, that is like the gross things of head and neck. We are starting, and the very first lecture we have is scalp. Okay, so the scalp is soft tissue which is covering the vault of skull. It is extending anteriorly from the eyebrows like superciliary arches. Posteriorly, we have superior nuchal lines. The extent of scalp posteriorly is superior nuchal line. Laterally, we have superior temporal lines. So these lines like superciliary arches we have studied when we were doing norma frontalis, which are present as eyebrows, and superior nuchal lines we have seen in the norma occipitalis, and superior temporal line we have seen in norma lateralis, right? Now you see here, this is the superciliary arches, this is the superior temporal line, and here you have the superior nuchal line. So the scalp is extending like this from anterior to posterior. The whole area of the skin which is surrounding the cranial vault is nothing but the scalp. Okay, so this whole area is also scalp only anteriorly. Okay, so this is the superior temporal line. Here we have the superior nuchal line. Okay, and these are the superciliary arches in front. So everything is the attachment of scalp. So we have certain layers in scalp. So we have 5 layers in scalp which are named as SCALP is the code for us to remember easily. S is standing for skin. C is standing for connective tissue, that is superficial fascia. Then third layer we have is aponeurosis, where we have occipitofrontalis muscle and its aponeurosis, that is the galea aponeurotica. Then the fourth layer is loose areolar tissue, and fifth layer is pericranium. You can check in this picture also. This is actually skull bone. Okay, the bone of the cranial vault. Okay, try to appreciate this in your textbook when you study. Just above the skull bone, you have the covering of the skull bone, which is pericranium. Okay, the fifth layer. As you move up, we have this area is loose connective tissue. Okay, as you move up, you have the next layer, that is the galea aponeurotica. Okay, epicranial aponeurosis is the other term. Here we have a muscle called as occipitofrontalis. As you move up, we have connective tissue. Okay, and then we have above which we have the skin. Now let us describe each layer in detail. So first layer is skin, then we have the connective tissue, then we have galea aponeurotica, we have loose areolar tissue, then this is the skull bone, outermost covering of the skull bone is periosteum. Okay, now let us talk about skin of the scalp, which is quite thick and hairy. You can feel and palpate the skin of your own head. How does it feel? It feels very thick. It has a lot of hair except over the forehead. It is firmly adherent to epicranial aponeurosis, that is the third layer, by dense connective tissue of superficial fascia. The first layer, which has lot of hair, it also contains maximum number of hair follicles, and it is associated with sebaceous glands. So this is the site where infections are quite common, that is sebaceous cyst. Our hair is always oily, though we take head bath second day, third day, again it feels oily. Why is it so? Because in the scalp we have lot of sebaceous glands, oil secreting glands, which keep the scalp in oily condition. Sometimes if they get infected, you call that condition as sebaceous cyst. Not only that, our scalp also sweats a lot. Why is it so? Because we also have numerous sweat glands. The very first section, usually what we do in head and neck region is scalp, for which we give incisions in this way, going from the lesion to the external occipital protuberance. Then one more line we see it is moving towards the behind the pinna. Okay, and the skin will be reflected in 4 flaps. Okay, then these are the 5 layers I said. What are those? Skin, connective tissue, aponeurosis, loose areolar tissue, and pericranium. So you can see here the skin is quite thick and it has been reflected, and where you are finding the next layer, that is connective tissue. Okay. The next layer what we have is the connective tissue. See, that is nothing but superficial fascia. So which is now this layer, you can see from this picture, which is dense fibrous connective tissue that firmly binds skin to underlying occipitofrontalis muscle and its aponeurosis, that is Galea aponeurotica. This is third layer. That means connecting the first and third layer, the bridging layer what we have is the second layer, that is connective tissue. The fibrous septa divide this layer into numerous small pockets which contain lot of fat, lobules of fat we will see here. Okay, you can see even these round cut sections are actually showing the blood vessels and nerves of scalp lie in this layer, which enter in from below at periphery. The walls of vessels are adherent to fibrous network. Okay, please understand this thing, the walls. That means, see, when you see the histology of the blood vessel, we have tunica intima, media, and adventitia. That means the adventitia of the blood vessel is adherent to the fibrous tissue surrounding, so that when the blood vessels are cut during some road traffic accidents, what happens? The blood vessels will not be able to contract, so that there will be profuse bleeding, because the walls of the vessels are adherent to fibrous network. Hence, they bleed profusely. So, in order to stop that bleeding, we are supposed to give pressure from outside, stopped by pressing these blood vessels against the underlying bone. Okay. Then, after this, we have the third layer, which is quite tough and thick. You call it as aponeurosis, epicranial aponeurosis, also called as Galea aponeurotica. Okay, Galea means it is helmet. So it will have two muscles, like from anterior aspect we have frontal belly, and posterior aspect we have occipital belly of the muscle, that is the occipitofrontalis. As we move on, we are now moving to the third layer. After you remove the second layer, that is the superficial fascia, that is connective tissue, which is prone for bleeding, where subcutaneous hemorrhages are not extensive since fascia is dense. Inflammation in the second layer can cause little swelling but are much painful. Okay, then coming to third layer, that is Galea aponeurotica, epicranial aponeurosis. The third layer, that is epicranial aponeurosis, is, see here, this is the Netter's atlas picture where we are finding this Galea aponeurotica. I said we have two muscles are attached to this. Anteriorly, we have the frontal belly of occipitofrontalis. Posteriorly, we have occipital belly of occipitofrontalis. Okay, so the name is epicranial aponeurosis, also called as Galea aponeurotica, which is thin tendinous sheet. Okay, it unites the occipital and frontal bellies on of the occipitofrontalis muscle. Okay, the lateral margins of the epicranial aponeurosis are attached to temporal fascia. I told you temporal fascia is the fascia which covers temporalis muscle, which we have seen in temporal fossa. Okay, the skin, the subcutaneous connective tissue, and epicranial aponeurosis are adherent to each other. That means first layer, second layer, and third layer, they are so much adherent, so that if you just move the scalp, they move as one layer. Okay, then see here subaponeurotic space. That means below this epicranial aponeurosis, whatever space is there, you call it as subaponeurotic space. Okay, then here you are finding the temporalis muscle. We are also seeing the temporal fascia. Okay, so subaponeurotic space is the potential space below epicranial aponeurosis. It is limited in front and behind by the origin of these muscles. What are these? Anterior we have frontalis, posterior we have occipitalis. Lateral restriction of epicranial aponeurosis is the attachment of temporal fascia, okay, which is occupied by loose areolar tissue. Okay, now we are moving to the next layer, that is the fourth layer. The fourth layer, you can see it is called as the loose connective tissue. Okay. Then below this epicranial aponeurosis, we are finding the loose connective tissue, also called as the loose areolar tissue. So it is occupying subaponeurotic space. Okay. It loosely connects the epicranial aponeurosis to the fifth layer, that is periosteum. That means fourth layer is connecting the third layer and fifth layer. Simple. Okay. That is. So it contains few small arteries also, and it contains some important emissory veins. Emissory veins, I have described everything when I was discussing the norma occipitalis, the veins which are connecting the veins of the scalp to the veins of the brain, that is dural venous sinuses. Such connecting veins are emissory veins. Okay, so the emissory veins are basically valveless veins because blood is anyhow moving towards gravity. Okay, they connect, emissory veins connect superficial veins of the scalp with the diploic veins of the skull bones and through them with the intracranial dural venous sinuses. Okay, then. So after the epicranial aponeurosis, we have loose areolar tissue which is extending anteriorly into the eyelids because frontalis has no bony attachment. Posteriorly, the loose areolar tissue is attached to superior nuchal line. On each side, it is moving up to superior temporal line. So bleeding causes generalized swelling of scalp. Then it is called as dangerous layer of scalp. This can be a 3 marks question. Which is the dangerous layer of scalp? The fourth layer, loose areolar tissue layer, is the dangerous layer of scalp because emissory veins open here and carry any infections to inside the brain. Okay, emissory veins actually they are opening here and carrying infections from the scalp to dural venous sinuses. And because it doesn't have any bony attachment, if there is any bleeding in this layer, what happens? The blood will slip down easily and it will get collected in the eye, which leads to a condition called as black eye. Because this layer, the fourth layer, has no bony attachments. Okay, and it is extending anteriorly into eyelids. Hence, it leads to black eye. I will show you this clinical pictures also. In case of newborn, because of the excessive pressure during the birth of the baby, there may be collection of fluid in this fourth layer, which leads to a bulge in the scalp region, which is called as caput succedaneum in the newborn. Okay. So next we have the last layer, that is periosteum, which is nothing but covering the skull bone. Okay, which is also called as pericranium. So this is our skull bone. It has outer table, it has inner table. In between area you call as diplo. Okay, the near the outer table, the outermost covering of the bone is called pericranium, also called as periosteum. Okay, covering the outer surface of the skull bone. Okay, at the sutures between the individual skull bones, the periosteum on the outer surface of the bones is continuous with periosteum of the inner surface of skull bones. Okay, that means periosteum. See, this is the outer pericranium, this is the inner pericranium. They are continuous at the level of sutures. For example, along sagittal suture, you can see the pericranium of outside and the pericranium of inside, they are continuous. Okay, so pericranium is the periosteum of the skull, loosely adherent to the surface of the bone, but it is firmly adherent along the sutures. Injury deep to it takes the shape of bone. That is called as cephalohematoma. Scalping injury should be replaced and stitched because healing is better always. Though you will see if there is any road traffic accident, scalp will be torn into many pieces, but if you bring those pieces back and if you suture it, it has got very good healing power because of enormous rich blood supply. Okay, now when you see the muscles of scalp, in the third layer, epicranial aponeurosis, I said anteriorly we have frontal belly, posteriorly we have occipital belly. Together you call the muscle as occipitofrontalis. Okay, the origin is it consists of 4 bellies, 2 occipital bellies and 2 frontal bellies, which are connected by epicranial aponeurosis. The occipital bellies are smaller, as you can see here, and arises from the highest nuchal line, what we have discussed in norma occipitalis. Okay, so it comes from the highest nuchal line of occipital bone and passes forwards to be attached to the epicranial aponeurosis. Then the frontal bellies are larger and closer to each other in the middle line. Then they arise from the skin and superficial fascia of the eyebrow and pass backwards to be attached to the epicranial aponeurosis. So you can see this is the frontal belly. This is our epicranial aponeurosis. Okay. Coming to the nerve supply of occipital belly, it is supplied by posterior auricular branch of facial. Frontal belly is supplied by temporal branch of facial nerve. Okay. Now the action is, now the first three layers of scalp can be moved forwards or backwards. The loose areolar tissue of fourth layer of scalp allowing the aponeurosis to move on the pericranium. That means 1 to 3 layers will slide together as one layer. Okay, you can see. First, second and third layer, they are moving as one layer. So what is the action of this muscle occipitofrontalis? You can see this picture. So the frontal belly of the occipitofrontalis can raise the eyebrows in expression of surprise or horror. Okay, so that is the frontal belly. Okay, so you can see which nerve is responsible. Just now I told you which nerve is that. The occipital belly and frontal belly, we have two different nerves. So the frontal belly is temporal branch of facial nerve. Please remember this. Then coming to the nerve supply and blood supply of scalp, I want every one of you to practice this diagram thoroughly because scalp is an essay question. It is 15 marks question and the question will be framed in a clinical way. We will be giving a hint like something like the fourth layer, dangerous area of scalp, emissary veins, or we will give you a hint something like black eye, or we will give you a hint something like caput cadenium, based on which you are supposed to identify the question as essay discussing the scalp. Now, when you talk about the blood supply of scalp, see, we have to discuss in front of the pinna and behind the pinna. So, in front of the pinna, we have supratrochlear, supraorbital arteries, which are the branches of internal carotid. We also have zygomaticotemporal artery, superficial temporal artery in front of the pinna. Behind the pinna, we have posterior auricular artery and occipital artery. Except supratrochlear and supraorbital, all the branches what we are seeing are the branches of external carotid. Only supratrochlear, supraorbital are the branches of internal carotid through ophthalmic branch. They come from the eye, they ascend over the forehead and then they enter into the scalp. Now, if you look at this picture, we will see like in front of the pinna, we have supratrochlear, supraorbital, and this temporal flap, which is supplied by superficial temporal. Behind, we have posterior auricular and occipital. You can just learn like the first two arteries, supratrochlear, supraorbital, are the ophthalmic artery branches, which in turn is a branch of internal carotid artery. Whereas remaining all arteries are the branches of external carotid arteries. Okay, so the place where you see external and internal carotid arteries are anastomosing, you call this area as potential site for collateral circulation between external and internal carotid arteries. Okay, so better you draw that picture. Which one? So better draw this picture and give the information like this. In front of the auricle, supratrochlear, branch of ophthalmic artery from internal carotid. Supraorbital also same. Superficial temporal, branch of external carotid. Behind the pinna, posterior auricular, a branch of external carotid. And occipital artery, a branch of external. Except for these two, all are the branches of external carotid artery. So once you are done with blood supply, we will see the nerve supply. Nerve supply also we have to check in front of the pinna and behind the pinna. So in front of the pinna, the names of the nerves are same. If you observe, supratrochlear nerve, supraorbital nerve. We also have zygomaticotemporal, auriculotemporal. Now behind we have great auricular, lesser occipital, greater occipital, and third occipital. So always we have to discuss the sensory nerve supply and motor nerve supply. Sensory nerve supply of the scalp comes from the branches of trigeminal. Trigeminal is fifth cranial nerve. Motor supply of the scalp comes from facial nerve, which is seventh cranial. Please remember, sensory is trigeminal, motor is facial. This is applicable for both scalp and face. Okay. Now let us see what are the sensory nerves we have in front of the pinna. Okay, we have supratrochlear nerve, which is the branch of ophthalmic division of trigeminal. Supraorbital is also branch of ophthalmic division of trigeminal. Then we have zygomaticotemporal, which is a branch of like maxillary division of trigeminal. Auriculotemporal is branch of mandibular division of trigeminal. So this is the sensory nerve supply of the scalp in front of the pinna. Okay, then in front of the pinna, we have one motor nerve. What is that one motor nerve? One motor nerve is also supplying the muscles of the third layer. What is that motor nerve? We have see temporal branch of facial we have in front, and behind we have posterior auricular branch of facial. So facial is the nerve which is giving motor supply. That means movements of muscles are possible because of the nerve supply coming from facial, both in the scalp and also in the face. Okay, so in front of the ear, the motor supply comes from temporal branch of facial nerve, supplies the frontal belly of occipitofrontalis. Behind the ear, we have posterior auricular branch of facial nerve, supplies occipital belly of occipitofrontalis. So now once you have done in front of the pinna, let us see the sensory supply behind the pinna. Pinna is nothing but external ear, auricle. Three names it has. Now behind the auricle, what are the various nerves we have? We have great auricular nerve. This is actually coming from the spinal nerves. The root value is C2 and C3. Okay, that means these are the branches coming from cervical plexus. Like you have seen brachial plexus in upper limb, we also have cervical plexus formed between C1, C2, C3, C4. So one of the branches you have is C2, C3 supplying behind the pinna. The name of the nerve is great auricular. As you go behind, we have lesser occipital, which is derived from the ventral ramus of the second cervical nerve. Then we have greater occipital, derived from the dorsal ramus of second cervical nerve. Then we have the third occipital, which is derived from the dorsal ramus of the third cervical nerve. If you can't remember so much, just practice this diagram and give the root values in brackets. Okay, behind the pinna, we have great auricular, lesser occipital, greater occipital, and third occipital. Okay, so that finishes our nerve supply and blood supply. So in order to understand the venous drainage of scalp, I'll try to make you understand this picture, which is actually like it is helpful for you to do the venous drainage of face and also for the scalp. Let us see. So this is supratrochlear vein and this is supraorbital vein. Supratrochlear and supraorbital veins are draining into this vein, which is towards the angle of the eye. You call it as the angular vein. From here, the venous blood is coming and finally it is draining into facial vein. So all this vein you are seeing is facial vein. So the facial vein has communications with the veins of brain. That is the dural venous sinus. One of the dural venous sinus is cavernous sinus. So the deep facial vein through emissory vein is connecting to the cavernous sinus. That means the deep facial vein has connections with pterygoid venous plexus. Pterygoid venous plexus via emissory vein, it connects with the cavernous sinus. Hence, if there is any infection in the facial region, what happens through emissory veins, the infection can pass to the brain, to the cavernous sinus, leading to the clotting of blood in the cavernous sinus called as thrombosis. Thrombosis of cavernous sinus. Okay. Now see here. So these are the communications of the facial vein. Okay. Via deep facial vein, pterygoid venous plexus, then emissory vein, then we have cavernous sinus. Now, if you continue this journey, I said this whole vein is facial vein. The facial vein is actually joining the anterior division of retromandibular vein. This is anterior division of retromandibular. which joins with the facial. Both of them are forming common facial vein. This common facial vein drains into internal jugular vein. Internal jugular vein. Now, how is this retromandibular vein formed? You see here, the superficial temporal vein and maxillary vein, they join to form retromandibular vein. The retromandibular vein has two divisions, anterior division and posterior division. The anterior division joins with the facial vein and it opens into the common facial vein which drains into internal jugular vein. Now coming to the posterior division of retromandibular vein, it joins the posterior auricular vein. The posterior auricular vein and posterior division of retromandibular vein, they drain into external jugular vein. The external jugular vein finally drains into subclavian vein. I want everybody to practice this picture, and if you understand the concept, you will write in your own words. Okay, you just go back to the video for 2 minutes and again repeat what I have told you so that you will understand better. So this is the venous drainage of scalp. So we have emissory veins connecting the vein outside the cranium with the intracranial dural venous sinuses, which pass through the foramina in the cranium. So these emissory veins, like if you observe this skull bone, number two is actually the parietal emissory vein, where arrow, these are the parietal bones, and here we have the parietal foramina. So parietal foramina will transfer the parietal emissory veins, which connect the veins of the scalp to superior sagittal sinus, which is one of the dural venous sinus of the brain. Towards the mastoid process, we have mastoid emissory vein, which communicates the veins of the scalp to sigmoid sinus, like that. See, this is the mastoid foramen. So from here, the mastoid emissory vein will communicate to the sigmoid sinus. Okay. So overall, the venous drainage, whatever I told you is listed here. You just read it once, pause the slide and read. You will understand better. Okay. Now coming to the lymphatic drainage of the scalp, the lymphatic drainage, see here, from the anterior part of the scalp, except for the lower half of the forehead, the lymph is moving to preauricular or superficial parotid lymph nodes. This is preauricular. From posterior part of the scalp, it is moving to posterior auricular or mastoid and occipital group of lymph nodes. Occipital and mastoid group of lymph nodes. Okay, so along with this, let us discuss certain things which are coming under clinical aspects. I told you the fourth layer has no bony attachments, isn't it? It is all loose connective tissue. So it has no bony attachments. Hence, if there is any head injury, the bleeding is there, the blood is actually moving to the eye. Okay, so in the lids, you will see the collection of blood is seen. So you call it as this condition as black eye. Okay, blood and fluid collecting in the layer of fourth layer, loose areolar tissue, following the blow of head, tracks freely under the scalp, producing generalized swelling over the dome of the skull. Okay, of course, it cannot pass to the occipital or temporal region because there it has bony attachments, but in front it has no bony attachments, and the blood, hence the blood easily slips down into the eyelids because occipitofrontalis, the frontal belly, has no bony attachments. So it leads to the formation of hematoma a few hours after head injury or cranial operation, causing black discoloration of eye around the eyes. Black discoloration of skin around the eyes, you call this condition as black eye. Okay, this condition is black eye. Okay, then see, first three layers of the scalp, they are actually moving as single layer, I said. Hence, they are usually called as surgical layers of scalp. Okay, and they form scalp proper. Okay. There is one more condition which I told you is cephalohematoma, where you will see the collection of blood is seen. It may be just below periosteum or it may be below the third layer, that connective tissue also, the subgaleal, like epicranial aponeurosis. Below that layer, in the loose connective tissue layer, lot of blood may be collected. You call it a subgaleal hemorrhage. Okay, it may be collected in the periosteum, cephalohematoma. Collection of water is caput succedaneum, which we usually see during prolonged labor. Okay, see yellow in color is skull bone. So inside the cranial cavity, if the collection of blood is there below the skull bone, you call it as extradural hemorrhage. Extradural hemorrhage. So this condition where you are finding collection of blood, okay, that collection of fluid, you call it as caput subcutaneum. Just below the skin, usually we find this collection, that is due to prolonged labor, delivery, but it will come back by itself within 24 to 48 hours. Cephalohematoma, it's a condition, what I said, it is nothing but the collection of blood below the periosteum. The other scalp injuries, what we have are cephalohydrocele, where like cerebrospinal fluid is accumulating in the fourth layer. If there is any fracture along the sutures, the fluid may come out and it may get collected below the fourth layer. So safety valve hematoma, then lacerations, I will show everything, abrasions, contusions, and hematomas. See, these are scalp wounds, okay, abrasions, okay, caput subcutaneum, cephalohematoma. Subcutaneum, I said, is collection of fluid. Hematoma is the collection of blood below, like just below the pericranium. This is one more picture which is showing us black eye. Thank you.